Amid countless worlds that seem like pure fiction, lie battles, sacrifices, and secrets that have never been told. Every story is a war between destiny and choice. If you're ready to uncover heroes, villains, and the forgotten souls lost in between, then step into the world of Comic Recap, where every tale is a battle for survival.
Political stability, security, legal systems, the arts, and shared cultural element 7 bureaucracy air. All aspects that, while sometimes criticized for inefficiency, serve an important role. Bureaucracy exists to check power and maintain fairness, supported by a complex legal tradition that upholds rights and protections. Still, it's important to remember that this is an empire in a fantasy world, where concepts like guilty until proven innocent are standard, and legal systems across Tamriel would not meet modern standards. Harsh punishments, poor prison conditions, and questionable justice are common, but that isn't unique to the Empire. Other regions, like Skyrim, likely have even more brutal systems. For example, their customs allow a ruler to challenge and kill the High King legally through a duel. Living under the Septim Empire was probably the most stable period in Tamriel's history. However, by the time of the Mede Dynasty, things became more complicated, especially due to the Great War. On one side of this conflict stood Emperor Titus Mede II and Skyrim's provincial governor, General Tullius. Titus Mede II led the empire during the Great War against the Aldmeri Dominion, ultimately accepting the harsh terms of the White Gold Concordat. He had only ruled for 3 years when the war began, and the fact that negotiation was even possible was seen as remarkable. The Battle of the Red Ring was a turning point, but it left the Imperial forces devastated. The army was severely depleted, with some legions completely destroyed and others barely functioning. The loss of the Imperial city the year before had also taken a heavy toll. Faced with this situation, Titus Mede II chose to accept peace. The war had drained the empire, and continuing it would have been disastrous. In the year 175 of the Fourth Era, the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion signed the White Gold Concordat. Though the terms were severe, banning the worship of Talos and surrendering southern Hammerfell, Emperor believed this was necessary to preserve what remained of the empire. While critics note that the agreement resembled the ultimatum rejected 5 years earlier, the circumstances were very different. Accepting such terms under threat is not the same as doing so after years of brutal conflict. In 171, the provinces would have rebelled against such concessions. By 175, peace was a widely accepted necessity. Titus Mede II prioritized stability and survival. After years of bloodshed, citizens were desperate for an end to the conflict. While some, especially devout worshippers of Talos, viewed this as a betrayal, the emperor had to focus on the well-being of the living rather than symbolic resistance. Unlike leaders such as Ulfric, who are tied to a single culture, Titus ruled a diverse empire and had to make decisions for all its people, not just one group. Talos holds special meaning for the Nords, connecting them culturally to the Empire. But other races like the Red Guards, Dunmer, or Bretons do not share this connection. This highlights the unique and complex Skyrim's previous rulers, perhaps including Toryg's father, had different qualities, but Toryg himself was seen as too sheltered and naive, more focused on pleasing his queen than governing his realm. The Empire's perspective suggests that Ulfric forced Toryg into a situation where, regardless of the outcome, Ulfric would seem justified. Still, calling it murder in a strict legal sense would be misleading. Stormcloak supporters argue that Torek could have declined the challenge, choosing not to meant accepting the consequences, including the risk to his honor. From a traditional and legal standpoint, Ulfric's actions could be seen as lawful, not as regicide. However, from an ethical or external viewpoint, the act might appear dishonorable or unfair. Ultimately, accusing Ulfric of regicide lacks strong legal foundation. Torek had the option to refuse but accepted the duel, likely fearing the political fallout if he didn't. After Torek's death, it's believed that Imperial soldiers attempted to arrest Ulfric, even though the duel followed Nordic custom and law. Ulfric fled Solitude, and when the player arrives there, they witness the execution of Rogvir, a guard who opened the gate for Ulfric's escape. Rogvir defends himself by claiming Ulfric challenged and defeated Torek in lawful combat, a recognized tradition in Skyrim. He insists that calling it murder is false. Whether Rogvir's execution was unjust depends on perspective. From a legal standpoint, Ulfric's arrest may have been unwarranted, and Rogvir simply upheld tradition. But as a city guard, Rogvir's duty was to Solitude and its leaders, meaning his actions could be seen as betrayal. This highlights the ongoing tension between legal and ethical interpretations, and between local loyalty and broader cultural ideals. In Skyrim, nobles similar to barons or lords hold land and authority. The term Thane refers to such nobles. Villages and towns paying tribute to Thanes reflects their feudal role. In the game, players can be granted Thaneship as an honorary title, along with property rights, but in reality, such a title would involve political and administrative responsibilities. Unlike the game's freedom, where players can collect Thane titles from every hold, the lore implies more restrictions. Thanes historically were granted land in exchange for military service. In Skyrim, they serve the Jarls, who rule over holds like Whiterun or Windhelm, usually through hereditary succession. Jarls participate in the Moot, a council to elect the High King, though typically the heir of the previous king is chosen, as with 2. Witch hunts were conducted within Imperial lands, particularly targeting those who worshipped Talos. The Morar incident, which Ulfric was responsible for, gave the Thalmor an opportunity to increase their involvement, arguing that the Empire was failing to ensure its subjects upheld the treaty. The situation became a tangled conflict of feudal duties, imperial law, Nordic traditions, and competing values, with constant debate over which should take priority. After High King Torek was killed and Ulfric Stormcloak escaped from Solitude, Skyrim was thrown into chaos. The eastern regions, the Pale, Winterhold, Eastmarch, and the Rift Tralite behind Ulfric in a fight for independence. The western areas, Hjalmarch, Hafengar, Falkreath, and the Reach remained loyal to the Empire. Jarl Balgruf of Whiterun tried to stay neutral, but ultimately sided with the Empire. Ulfric was captured months later in what an Imperial soldier, Hadvar, described as a brilliant move by General Tullius. According to him, Ulfric had evaded capture since the war began, but this time, the general turned the situation around. Ulfric walked into an ambush with only a few guards and surrendered without much resistance, undermining his reputation for choosing death over surrender. Hadvar believed Ulfric would be taken to Cyrodiil, but the general changed plans. With the political situation outlined, attention turns to the Stormcloak perspective. On the surface, their rebellion is a fight for independence from what they see as a cowardly and oppressive empire, especially regarding religious oppression caused by the empire's agreement with the Aldmeri Dominion, which banned Talos worship. For the Stormcloaks, this is a matter of identity and survival. The empire has declined, and the Dominion threatens to erase the god that once united it with the Nords. This issue may seem less important elsewhere, but in Skyrim, it has created deep anger. Even critics of the Empire admit these are not its proudest times. However, many argue that the Empire had no choice. Without the peace treaty, the Dominion would have destroyed it. The counterpoint is that without unity, the Thalmor could defeat everyone. Some believe the treaty is a temporary compromise, a chance to recover and prepare for future conflict. Yet, as one quote puts it, when facing judgment, excuses won't matter. In a culture where honor, family, and earning, Talos, also known as Tiber Septim, was the founder of the empire and is believed to have ascended to godhood. He was born in Atmora and was prophesied by the Greybeards, a master of the voice. He rebuilt the Cyrodiilic Empire, uniting all of Tamriel for the first time in history. For his great deeds, he was elevated to divine status and became the 9th divine in the Imperial Pantheon. His descendants ruled the Septim Empire throughout the Third Era, until it ended with the sacrifice of Martin Septim. After the Stormcrown Interregnum, the Mede dynasty rose to power and continued his legacy. Talos was worshipped as the 9th divine and god of the empire until the end of the Great War, when the White Gold Concordat was signed. Since then, he is officially recognized only as a man, not a god. To the Stormcloaks, this is not only a betrayal of a shared legacy with the Empire, but also an alliance with their ancient enemies, the Elves. It is a matter of faith. The Thalmor do not acknowledge Talos as a god and claim he was merely a man, unworthy of a place in the Pantheon. The Empire has agreed to these terms and expects its people to end what it sees as heretical worship. To truly understand the roots of the Stormcloak Rebellion, one must delve deep into history and examine the foundations of Nordic culture. In ancient myths, the Nordic gods, led by their chieftain Shor called Lorcan by the Elves, fought against the Elven gods on behalf of humanity. Shor was killed and became the god of the underworld, where Nords believe they go in death to rest in Sovngarde. From the beginning, there has been deep resentment toward elves in Nordic tradition, and this is reflected throughout their history. Isgramr and his 500 companions nearly exterminated the Snow Elves from Skyrim in revenge for the Night of Tears. Notably, Isgramr also founded Windhelm, later the capital of Skyrim, and symbolically significant to the Stormcloak movement. Ulfric's desire to reclaim the Jagged Crown reflects the importance of these ancient symbols. It is a relic of the kings from Isgramor's line and represents a return to the old ways. These symbols and traditions serve both to inspire and to legitimize a movement that seeks to revive what they see as a pure Nordic past. During the early First Era, Skyrim expanded its influence dramatically under the First Empire of the Nords, conquering parts of High Rock, Morrowind, and territories held by the Dwemer and Elves. They often found other human races enslaved or oppressed under Elven rule. This was true in... Heck yes, Radiant Black absolutely rules. Kyle Higgins has built something incredible with the massive verse. The mix of superhero storytelling, grounded character work, and cosmic scale threats gives it a unique flavor that stands out from typical Cape comics. Nathan and Marshall's dynamic alone is enough to carry the series. But then you get deep lore, insane suit powers, and world-altering stakes layered in. If you're calling it God, I assume you're deep into the series. Do you have a favorite arc or issue? Or are you caught up with the Catalyst War saga? Because that shook the table. His ability to use the Thuum reveals something important. Although he seldom calls upon his training, he acknowledges that the Greybeards taught the voice should only be used in devotion to the divine. He admits to having strayed from their strict teachings, yet still feels it shouldn't be used casually. Despite his divergence, the influence of their philosophy remains with him, even if he couldn't fully live by it outside the solitude of High Hrothgar. Among today's Nords, he's a rarity, someone trained in the way of the voice by the Greybeards. If you ever challenge him, it becomes clear he's skilled in shouting, a result of nearly 10 years of training in his youth. There's debate about his exact age during the events in Skyrim. Estimates vary, but it's unlikely he's older than 50, more likely in his mid-40s. Some suggest 60, though that would imply he's aged remarkably well. Assuming he was around 10 when chosen by the Greybeards and spent almost a decade with them before leaving to fight in the Great War, he would have been just under 20 around 4E171, making him about 50 now. He felt compelled to join the Great War, and it's likely he had family members, perhaps older brothers or cousins also involved. This speculation stems from the idea that noble families wouldn't typically send their only heir to live as a monk on a mountain. The war lasted from 4E171 to 175, during which he fought alongside Galmar Stonefist, his most loyal supporter, and also with Legate Ricky, a Nord woman who later served the Empire. Their shared past is implied during the confrontation in Solitude, where their conflicting loyalties come to a head. The exchange reflects the deep personal and ideological divides caused by the Civil War. The most controversial document concerning him is the Thalmor Dossier, often misunderstood. In this context, the term asset doesn't imply loyalty or service, but rather someone who serves their interests indirectly. Ulfric is labeled an uncooperative asset not because he supports their goals, but because the civil war he leads diverts the Empire's strength, which benefits Thalmor's strategy. The Thalmor, known for manipulation and secrecy, gained power through coups and territorial control, often undermining the Empire's intelligence efforts. Ulfric's tragedy becomes clear through the dossier. He was captured during the White Gold Tower campaign, interrogated, and deemed valuable due to his status as the son of Windhelm's Jarl. He was made to believe that information he gave under duress led to the fall of the Imperial City, though the city had already fallen. Ulic's deep hidden shame is one of the key reasons behind his passionate intensity and sense of moral purpose, need to redeem himself, especially after breaking under interrogation. At this point, he hasn't turned against the Empire. According to dialogue from Galmar and Ulic, they were all present at the signing of the White Gold Concordat. This suggests that, after his escape, Ulic returned to fight in the war and likely participated in the Battle of the Red Ring, the war's climactic confrontation and the recapture of the Imperial City. However, this is also when his faith in the Empire began to falter. There's a line in a dossier that states, "After the war, contact was established, and he has proven his worth as an asset. The phrase proven worth as an asset likely means that he became useful to the Thalmor because he stirred up anti-imperial sentiment and eventually helped incite rebellion. The phrase contact was established might suggest the Thalmor approached him directly, but that seems unlikely given his background and beliefs. It's more plausible that Thalmor agents, perhaps spies or informants, close to him kept tabs on his actions and tried to influence him indirectly through espionage tactics. This same dossier will come up again in later discussions of the Thalmor's motives. For now, it's clear the Thalmor benefit from the ongoing civil war a divided Skyrim is in their interest. However, Ulick himself neither supports their goals nor aligns with them. The dossier even states that a Stormcloak victory is not desirable, meaning that any support given to them must be handled with caution. Returning to Ulick's story, he was captured and tortured, led to believe his information helped the Thalmor capture the city, and felt deep shame for breaking. Despite this, he continued fighting in the war. Then came the signing of the White Gold Concordat, which banned Talos worship, a move that felt like betrayal to Ulick and many others. He returned to Skyrim between 4E 174 and 176, during which the Empire, preoccupied with the Great War, lost control of the Reach. The Forsworn established their own kingdom for 2 years in what later became known as the Markarth Incident. This incident further alienated Ulick from the Empire. When the Empire made a deal with Nord militia offering free Talos worship in return for helping retake the Reach, they were later forced to arrest these warriors under pressure from the Thalmor. Ulick, their leader, saw this as further proof the Empire had abandoned Skyrim. This moment is widely seen as the birth of the Stormcloak Rebellion. Twice now, Ulick had been betrayed. He was imprisoned, and during that time, his father, known as the Great Bear of East Markstead, Ulick, unable to attend the funeral, had to send his eulogy through a smuggled letter. When he was finally released, he returned to Windhelm to find a grieving city and people calling for justice and war. They placed him on the throne, his father's throne, hoping he could lead them. The exact length of Ulick's imprisonment is unknown. Ulfric's life helps explain his motivations. From a young age, he has shown deep respect for duty and his people. He genuinely cares about Skyrim and is willing to die for it. To claim otherwise would be a misrepresentation of his character, even if some believe his views are misguided. It's likely that the shame he felt after giving up information under torture as a young man drove him to adopt a more zealous and uncompromising attitude as a form of atonement. There are aspects of his personality that suggest he sees himself as Skyrim's only true savior, with a rigid with me or against me mindset. This is seen in his ultimatum to Whiterun and his harsh treatment of the Forsworn at Markarth. Even other Nords who opposed him were said to have faced severe consequences, though that account may carry some bias. Nevertheless, this view of his character seems fair. Ulfric respects tradition, as shown in the duel with Torrig, and even after defeating the Empire, he refuses to claim the title of High King without being chosen by the Moot. Still, he is confident he would be elected, just as he knew Torrig would have to fight him and that he would win. A key issue with Ulfric's idealism and that of his followers is their disregard for practical realities. Zealots may prefer death or hardship over compromising their beliefs. Despite the flaws in their leader or the rebellion's execution, the core ideals of the Stormcloak Rebellion resonate with many. Before examining the problems with the faction, it's important to clarify what they represent. The Stormcloaks advocate for self-rule and independence from the Empire, which they believe has betrayed its core values. They want to preserve Skyrim's identity and culture. To them, if the Empire won't even honor the god that once bound them together, then it has lost its legitimacy. They want freedom from what they see as a broken system. Supporters of the Empire argue for unity and stability, saying the Empire must be preserved to keep order. However, others question if the current Empire is even worth saving, as it no longer resembles what it once was. Over 200 years ago, in the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, an avatar of Talos, said that the Empire was getting old, and that perhaps it was time for something new. Change might be messy, but it's often necessary. From that perspective, the Stormcloak Rebellion could be seen as a force for renewal. Still, their current goals haven't yet shown such broad vision. If you side with them, Ulfric speaks of rebuilding Skyrim and preparing for future tea. Thought for 6 seconds. It looks like the link you provided, U2B Jack We6S, didn't clearly pull up a specific video result. YouTube doesn't show a direct match for that ID. Could you double check the link, or provide the video title, or a short description of what it's about? I'm ready to help review, summarize, or discuss once we track it down. Sources. The character's fate is known, and holds importance for Tamriel's future, in terms of official lore. Each of the guild questlines is considered canon in a general sense, though it's never directly stated that any specific hero completed them. This allows the official story to exist without contradicting individual player experiences. For example, it is accepted as canon that the Grey Fox stole an Elder Scroll, Lucian Lachance was killed, and Umaril was defeated by the Knights of the Nine. However, these events aren't necessarily credited to the player's specific character. Based on this pattern, it's likely that in the Elder Scrolls 6, the events of each guild storyline from Skyrim will be considered canon. The Eye of Magnus taken by the Psijic Order, Mercer Frey killed, and the Skeleton Key returned to Nocturnal, the Silver Hand defeated and Kodlak's soul freed, and the Dark Brotherhood's listener assassinating Emperor Titus Mede II aboard his ship, the Katera, in Solitude's Bay. This assassination appears to have been arranged by a member of the Elder Council, Amand Motier, along with possible allies within the Imperial government. Back in 3E 341, Emperor Pelagius Septim was assassinated in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City by a Dark Brotherhood agent. This marked a shift in Imperial leadership. Similar motives appear to be at play again. While the direct line of Septim's succession has its complexities, including cousin marriages, Empress Kintira Septim descended from Tiber Septim's brother took the throne after Pelagius, as preferred by the Elder Council. This suggests that the Elder Council, or a similar secretive group, may be orchestrating events behind the scenes. While it's unclear who the heirs to Titus Mede II are, it's assumed they exist, and whoever is to take the throne must align with the conspirators' goals. The specifics of those goals are unknown, though they might involve reigniting conflict with the Aldmeri Dominion, restoring the worship of Talos, or forming alliances with regions like Hammerfell. Alternatively, perhaps the Council desires stability, and Titus Mede II's potential ambition for a final redemptive campaign posed a threat to that balance. What is known for certain is that Titus Mede II is assassinated, marking a significant shift for the Empire. During the Civil War storyline in Skyrim, the Emperor remains distant, with General Tullius acting as the military governor of Skyrim, aiming to suppress Ulfric Stormcloak's rebellion. Tullius is portrayed as a pragmatic, loyal soldier of the Empire, often clashing with Nordic customs and rejecting Ulfric's claim to leadership. The fate of a certain character is known and plays a role in Tamriel's future, at least as far as official lore is concerned. Each guild questline is considered part of the established story, though it's never directly stated that a specific hero completed them. This approach preserves player immersion while maintaining continuity. For instance, it's accepted that the Grey Fox stole an Elder Scroll, Lucien Lachance was killed, and Umaril was defeated by the Knights of the Nine. These events are canon, but not necessarily tied to a specific player's character. It's likely that in the Elder Scrolls 6, guild quest lines will again be considered completed in the official timeline. That would mean the Eye of Magnus is taken by the Sigic Order, Mercer Frey is killed, the Skeleton Key is returned to Nocturnal, the Silver Hand is defeated, and Kodlak Whitemane's soul is freed from Hircine's realm. Following this pattern, the listener of the Dark Brotherhood would have successfully assassinated Emperor Titus Mede II aboard his ship, the Qatar, in Solitude's Bay. This assassination is part of the canon and was apparently arranged by a member of the Elder Council Amon Motier, likely with help from others within the Empire's leadership. In 3E41, Emperor Pelagius Septim was killed in the Temple of the One by a Dark Brotherhood assassin. His death brought a significant change in Imperial politics. Some now seem to desire a similar shift. While specifics can't be shared, it appears that the Elder Council or a shadow faction opposed Pelagius's rule, leading to his assassination. His successor, Empress Kintira Septim, was the daughter of Pelagius's cousin, which makes the Septim bloodline from that point somewhat indirect. This raises the possibility of cousin intermarriages in the line of succession. Historically, the Elder Council has backed preferred rulers, sometimes using assassination to make way for them. It appears this may have happened again. The problem is that little is known about Titus Mede II's potential heirs. It's assumed he had descendants, but their identities and traits remain speculative. Based on Motier's actions, whoever the heir is likely aligns with the Council's goals, though what those are remains unclear. There are many possibilities. Perhaps the Council wants to reignite tensions with the Aldmeri Dominion, restore Talos worship, and forge alliances with places like Hammerfell. It's possible that Titus Mede II, due to his past, resisted these moves to avoid another devastating war. On the other hand, perhaps he was pushing for change and the Council wanted to maintain peace. Regardless, his assassination is a certainty and will lead to a shift in the Empire's direction. During Skyrim's Civil War questline, there's no direct interaction with the Emperor. General Tullius, a military governor, is sent to suppress the rebellion led by Ulfric Stormcloak. Though he is loyal and pragmatic, he often clashes with Nordic traditions and refuses to recognize Ulfric's claim. He's a soldier carrying out his orders, trying to restore order amidst the chaos of civil war. Here is the paraphrased version of the provided text in standard English. It is known what his fate is, and it's something to consider regarding Tamriel's future canon. Each of the guild quest lines is generally treated as canonical, although it's never clearly stated that the protagonist specifically completed them. This approach helps avoid contradicting the player's individual experience. For instance, it is canon that the Grey Fox stole an Elder Scroll, Lucien Lachance was killed, and Umaril was defeated by the Knights of the Nine. However, these events aren't necessarily attributed to the player's specific character. Only the main storyline events are explicitly linked to the player. With that in mind, it's reasonable to believe that for the Elder Scrolls 6, each guild questline will be fulfilled in canon. This means events such as the Eye of Madness being taken by the Sigic Order, Mercer Frey being killed, the Skeleton Key returned to Nocturnal, the Silver Hand being defeated, and Kodlak's soul freed from Hersine's grasp, all would have happened. Following that logic, the listener of the Dark Brotherhood would have successfully assassinated Emperor Titus Mede II aboard his ship, the Katera, anchored in Solitude's Bay. The Emperor's assassination is considered a canonical event, likely arranged by a member of the Elder Council, Amon Motier, and possibly other co-conspirators within the imperial government. Historically, in 3E 341, Emperor Pelagius Septim was murdered by a Dark Brotherhood assassin in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. His death brought about a significant shift in imperial policy. Now, there are those who seek a similar change. Although the details are limited, the suggestion is that the Elder Council, or a hidden faction, did not support Pelagius as ruler. As a result, his first cousin, once removed daughter of Tiras Septim's brother Agarthwas, crowned Empress Kintira Septim, beginning a new line of succession. Interestingly, this means the Septim dynasty doesn't directly descend from Tiras unless there were cousin marriages involved, which is a complex issue on its own. The key point is that, back then, the Elder Council preferred a different ruler and used the Dark Brotherhood to make it happen. It seems a similar situation has occurred again. However, there's little information about the potential heirs. It's assumed that Titus Mede II had children and grandchildren, but their identities and qualities are unknown. What's evident is that whoever the heirs are, they must support the conspirators' agenda though. What that agenda is remains speculative. Some speculate that there's a desire to provoke hostilities with the Aldmeri Dominion, restore Talos worship, or rebuild alliances with Hammerfell. Maybe Titus Mede II, shaped by his past, opposed these actions to avoid another devastating war. On the other hand, perhaps he was prepared to take bold action at the end of his reign. All of this is speculation, but one fact is certain: he was assassinated, and this will lead to some form of transition within the Empire. During the Skyrim Civil War questline, the Emperor himself never apps. There has long been tension between the High Elves and the Empire of Man. The first Aldmeri Dominion and Alliance of Somerset, Valenwood, and elsewhere was originally formed by Queen Erin. According to a source from a Sapiarch of Indoctrination, races such as orcs, dark elves, and especially men excel at war, having turned Tamriel into a battlefield soaked in blood. As long as their conflicts were confined to the area around the Imperial City, the High Elves paid little attention. But after the catastrophic dragon break attributed solely to Mentha High Elves were forced to intervene and repair the damage, now the Empire has made yet another disastrous mistake, endangering everyone. As a result, the Queen had no choice but to re-establish the Aldmeri Dominion and take control of Cyrodiil, to prevent men from ever again tampering with powers beyond their understanding. The High Elves and their allies, the Wood Elves and Khajiit, believe they alone possess the wisdom and restraint to rule Tamriel peacefully. Though reluctant, they view this responsibility as necessary. Recent events suggest the Dragon Break was not a one-time occurrence. Men consistently follow a destructive path, guided by their missing god. This must end. The elves intend to rule Tamriel from the White Gold Tower this time, permanently. This all occurs during the Three Banners War, the central conflict of the Elder Scrolls Online. While the current Dominion appears more moderate than its predecessor, the ultimate goal remains the same. The elves believe their long lives and natural superiority give them the right to govern Tamriel, claiming they are best suited to guide the world. The first Aldmeri Dominion eventually collapsed before the Second Era's end. Near the close of that era, in the year 2E830, a second Dominion emerged, taking control of Valenwood to protect against external threats, like the Colovians. This lasted until Tiber Septim's arrival in 2E852, when the Empire's conquest and the use of the Numidium devastated Somerset Isles and forced their surrender. This marked the end of the Second Dominion. Naturally, the High Elves resented both Talos and Imperial rule. While Somerset's rulers complied outwardly, it appears a more radical group within their society began plotting a return to what they saw as the rightful Order Elven dominance over Tamriel. These efforts culminated in the Fourth Era, with a coup in Somerset and Valenwood, followed by an alliance with Elsweyr, leading to the creation of a third Aldmeri Dominion. At the center of this dominion is the Thalmor. Historically obscure, the Thalmor were originally a council appointed to preserve elven heritage. Under Queen Erin, they became the executive branch of the First Dominion, including representatives from the High Elves, Wood Elves, and Khajiit. They absorbed other governing bodies, such as the Divine Prosecution. When the First Dominion fell, the Thalmor remained influential, re-emerging with the Second Dominion. According to the third edition of the Pocket Guide to the Empire, the Bosmer had been loyal, though not enthusiastic, subjects of the Camoran Empire. After its fall in 2E430, the various kingdoms of Valenwood became fragmented and engaged in internal conflict. Without a strong central power, they were vulnerable to outside threats like there has long been tension between the High Elves and the Empire of Man. The first Aldmeri Dominion and Alliance of Somerset, Valenwood, and Elsweyr, as it exists today, was established by Queen Erin. According to a source from the Sapiarch of Indoctrination, elves consider orcs, dark elves, and especially men to be most adept at war, having flooded Tamriel with blood. As long as their violence remained within their own conflicts in the area around the imperial city, the elves of Somerset paid them little mind. However, after the Dragon Break, a catastrophe blamed entirely on meant the elves were forced to intervene. Once again, the Empire made a disastrous mistake, threatening all of Nirn. The Queen had no choice but to reform the Aldmeri Dominion, with the goal of conquering Cyrodiil and preventing men from ever again interfering with forces they cannot understand. According to this view, only the Aldmerith High Elves and their allies, the Wood Elves and Khajiit, have the wisdom and discipline to peacefully govern the peoples of Tamriel. Although reluctant to take on this responsibility, Events have shown that it is necessary. Recent events have demonstrated that the Dragon Break was not unique. Men continue to follow a path of destruction, guided by their devotion to a missing god who shall remain unnamed. The elves have resolved that this ends now. Elves will once again rule Tamriel from the White Gold Tower, this time permanently. This takes place during the Three Banners War, the central conflict in the Elder Scrolls Online. The present-day Dominion appears more moderate than its earlier version, yet its goal remains clear. Elves believe their longevity and natural superiority grant them the right to rule, and that only they possess the foresight to guide the world. The first Aldmeri Dominion dissolved before the Second Era ended. By 2E830, a second Aldmeri Dominion emerged, taking control of Valenwood and forming a defensive front against external threats, such as the Colovian estates. This lasted until Tiber Septim's rise in 2E852, whose imperial campaigns in the Numidium devastated the Somerset Isles, forcing them into submission and bringing an end to the Second Dominion. The High Elves were never comfortable under imperial rule. While Somerset's leaders played along, a more radical faction within worked toward revenge and restoration of what they saw as the natural Order Elven dominance over Tamriel. This effort culminated during the Fourth Era with a coup in Somerset and Valenwood, and the elves have long wished to preserve their way of life, if not to dominate, and have had ongoing tensions with both the High Elves and the Empire of Man. The first Aldmeri Dominion, an alliance of Somerset, Valenwood, and elsewhere, was established under Queen Erin, according to a source by Anta of Shimmerine, the sapiarch of indoctrination. Orcs, dark elves, and especially men excel at warfare, having soaked Tamriel in blood for ages. As long as their violence remained among themselves, particularly in and around the so-called Imperial City, the High Elves paid little attention. But everything changed with the Dragon Break, an event blamed entirely on men. The High Elves were forced to fix what was broken. Now, with another disastrous mistake by the Empire threatening all of Nirn, the Queen had no choice but to reform the Aldmeri Dominion and take the Imperial City. The aim, to prevent men from ever again meddling with powers beyond their grasp. Only the Elves, High Elves, Wood Elves, and Khajiitari believed to possess the wisdom and discipline to rule peacefully over Tamriel's varied peoples. Though reluctant, circumstances demand their leadership. Recent history proves the Dragon Break was not unique. Men continue to follow the ruinous path of their lost god. This must end. Elves will once again rule Tamriel from the White Gold Tower, this time permanently. This all unfolds during the Three Banners War, the central conflict of the Elder Scrolls Online. The modern Dominion seems more moderate than its predecessors, which is notable. However, the end goal remains unchanged. Elves see their long lives and natural superiority as justification to lead Tamriel, believing only they are fit to guide the world. The first Aldmeri Dominion eventually collapsed before the end of the Second Era. By 2E830, a second Dominion rose, taking control of Valenwood and forming a defense against outsiders until the rise of Tiber Septim in 2E852. His conquests and the advance of Numidium devastated Somerset, forcing submission. The Second Dominion fell. The High Elves, naturally, resented both Talos and Imperial rule. While some leaders played along diplomatically, a more radical faction within bided its time, seeking revenge and a return to elven supremacy. This plan unfolded throughout the Fourth Era. A coup in Somerset, Valenwood, and an alliance with Elsewhere led to the creation of a third Aldmeri Dominion. Its leadership body, the Thalmor, has a deeper past. Originally a little-known council protecting Aldmeri heritage, they were elevated to executive authority under Queen Erin during the First Dominion. They included representatives from the High Elves, Wood Elves, and Khajiit, absorbing institutions like the Divine Prosecution under their control. After the First Dominion's fall, the Thalmor re-emerged with the Second. According to the Pocket Guide to the Empire, the Bosmer remained compliantive, not entirely loyal subjects of the Camoran Empire. Following its fall in 2E 430, attempts to re-establish unity failed, and internal conflict broke out. With no central power, Valenwood fell into chaos, unable to resist incursions from neighboring forces. It took external influence to reunite the region, namely Somerset. The unified kingdom of Valenwood and Somerset became the Aldmeri Dominion, the most stable power in Tamriel until Tiber Septim's arrival. The Valenwood government was then known as the Thalmor, a congress of Bosmer chieftains and Aldmeri diplomats. Though not especially popular, it proved more effective than previous. You're giving feedback on a new version of ChatGPT. Which response do you prefer? Responses may take a moment to load. ChatGPT Response 1. The assassination of Pento Diato, who was overseeing the Empire, is shrouded in mystery, though it's not confirmed to be a plot by the Thalor. However, it undeniably played into their objectives, plunging the Empire into turmoil and sparking a civil war. Amid this chaos, the Thalor moved swiftly, toppling the rightful monarchs of the Ultima. I recall the disgust and shock that gripped me when I heard that this madness had taken hold of my once proud homeland. Many from our great race actually embraced this madness. Then, the first pilgrims arrived on Somerset Isle, slaughtering anyone not of Alar blood an excuse to eliminate dissenters, which the Thalor have always seized upon. During this time, they were able to depose the King of Somerset and take control of the Isles, renaming them Eleanor. By the 29th year of the Fourth Era, the Old Mar Dominion was re-established, uniting Eleanor and Valenwood after a successful Thalor-backed coup against all Imperial-aligned factions. After this, communication with the Empire was cut off. The long-lived elves of Alinor had endured over 4 centuries of Imperial rule and had patiently prepared for another 100 years for their revenge. In the 98th year of the Fourth Era, the 2 moons, Massa and Sukunda, disappeared in an event known as the Void Nights. By the 100th year, they reappeared, and the Thalor took credit for their return, gaining significant influence over the Khajiit of Elsewhere, who are heavily dependent on the moons. By the 115th year, the Elsewhere Confederacy of 16 tribes dissolved into the 2 kingdoms of Anina and Palatine, both now client states of the Old Mar Dominion. The Dominion spent over 50 years scheming and building strength before launching the Great War in 171 on the 30th of Frostfall. The Old Mar Dominion sent an ambassador to the Imperial City with a gift in a covered cart and an ultimatum for the new emperor. The long list of demands included steep tributes, the disbandment of the Blades, the banning of Talos worship, and the ceding of large sections of Hammerfell to the Dominion. Despite warnings from his generals about the Empire's military weakness, Emperor Titus M rejected the ultimatum. The Thalar ambassador then overturned the cart, spilling over 100 heads on the Florevery Blades agent in Somerset and Valen Woodend. Thus began the Great War, which would devastate both the Empire and the Old Mar Dominion for the next 5 years. Eventually, the White Gold Concordat was signed, establishing peace between the Thalor and the Empire under certain conditions, with the primary one being the outlawing of Talos worship. The Thaloi are now deeply embedded in imperial politics, with diplomats and justiciars ensuring the terms of the Concordat are upheld and undoubtedly also spying and reporting back to the higher echelons of Alinor. The goals of the Thalor and the broader Old Mar Dominion seem straightforward. They aim to destroy the Empire and restore elven dominance over Tamriel, a state not seen since the days of the Mike era over 500 years ago. To them, conflict is inevitable, and this peace is simply a period of preparation. The Thalor are a radical group, staunchly pro-Timmery, believing in the racial superiority of the High Elves. Unlike past dominions, today's Thalor are explicitly pro-Timmery, with the Khajiit and Bosmer seen as secondary constituents. It's hard to imagine the Thalor would accept a Khajiit on the Ruby Throne. Some speculative theories suggest that the Thalor want to undo the world of law in which they are trapped, hoping to reunite with Anu as eternal spirits, removing Talos from the heavens to fulfill their vision. While such theories are more speculative, the basic understanding remains clear. The Thalor seek to rule Tamriel. The idea that men hold ultimate power in Tamriel, represented by the Empire, is an affront to them and a direct insult, especially when it involves the worship of Tolosaman becoming a god, which they see as heresy. Moreover, this man was the very one who subjugated Somerset, using a superweapon like the Nedium, causing great harm to their proud race. The Dominion is clearly set up as the villain in this narrative, with their secret police, shadow government, espionage, ethnic cleansing, and racial supremacy all hallmarks of a classic antagonist. Some have compared their treatment of other races to that of Ulfric and the Stormcloaks, though the nature of this comparison remains open to interpretation. ChatGPT responds to Pentodiado, who was serving as steward of the Empire, was assassinated. While there is no confirmed link to the Thalmor, the event clearly furthered their interests by plunging the Empire into the Stormcrown interregnum. Amid this chaos, the Thalmor acted swiftly, overthrowing the rightful rulers of the Altmer. The reaction to this news was one of horror and disgust, especially as many among their own people accepted this madness. Pilgrims began arriving on Somerset Isle, executing anyone not of Altmer blood, a convenient justification to eliminate dissenters. The Thalmor wasted no opportunity, overthrowing the King of Somerset and renaming the Isles to Alinor. By the 29th year of the Fourth Era, the Aldmeri Dominion was re-established, uniting Alinor and Valenwood after a Thalmor-backed coup removed Imperial-aligned factions. Communication with the Empire was cut off. The long-lived elves of Alinor were playing a patient game. Having survived 4 centuries under Imperial rule, they were willing to wait another 100 years to exact their revenge. In the 98th year of the Fourth Era, the moons, Maser and Secunda Venishta, period known as the Void Nights. By year 100, the moons reappeared, and the Thalmor claimed responsibility for their return. This earned them considerable influence among the Khajiit, whose culture and religion are deeply tied to the moons. By year 115, the Elsewhere Confederacy dissolved into the kingdoms of Anaquina and Palatine, becoming client states of the Dominion. Over the next 50 years, the Dominion prepared for war. On the 30th of Frostfall, in the year 171 of the Fourth Era, they sent an ambassador to the Imperial City with a covered cart and a list of demands: massive tributes, the disbanding of the Blades, the banning of Talos worship, and the cession of Hammerfell territory. Despite warnings from his generals about the Empire's military vulnerability, Emperor Titus Mede II refused. The ambassador overturned the card, revealing over 100 severed head Severy Blades agent in Somerset and Valenwood. Thus began the Great War, which raged for 5 years. Eventually, the White Gold Concordat brought peace between the Thalmor and the Empire. Chief among its terms was the ban on Talos worship. Since then, Thalmor agents and justiciars have been deeply involved in imperial affairs, closely monitoring compliance and reporting back to Alinor. The Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion have clear objectives: to destroy the Empire and re-establish Elven dominance over Tamriella, return to the state of the Merethic era, over 4,500 years ago. To them, conflict is inevitable, and the current peace is merely a time to prepare. The Thalmor are radical supremacists who believe in the inherent superiority of the High. The Stormcloaks aren't exactly known for their racial tolerance, but compared to the Thalmor, they're on an entirely different scale. While Ulfric and his followers prioritize Nords and seek independence from external influence, their movement centers on freedom and self-determination, not racial cleansing or religious domination. They don't represent perfect inclusivity, but their approach is far from the Thalmor's supremacist and eugenic ideology. Among Nords and most humans, character and merit tend to outweigh lineage, unlike the High Elves, who focus heavily on bloodline purity. A Stormcloak might respect an honorable Imperial who opposes corruption more than a Nord who submits to it. In contrast, the Thalmor judge worth based solely on race and ancestry, regardless of individual merit. During Skyrim's civil war, the Thalmor actively worked to prolong the conflict, to weaken the Empire in preparation for a future war. Within the Dominion, anyone who isn't a pure High Elf faces significant hardship. The Thalmor rely heavily on espionage and propaganda, which is necessary given their low population. They can't conquer Tamriel by force alone. Instead, they depend on loyal client states and controlled societies. The Empire, on the other hand, is more bureaucratic and inclusive, allowing participation from various races and offering tangible benefits like infrastructure, protection, and order. Many in Skyrim enjoy these advantages, and even without strong ideological loyalty, they find the lifestyle appealing enough to remain under Imperial rule. Although the Dominion could, in theory, offer similar material benefits, their ideology is deeply unpopular, especially among humans, who make up the majority of Tamriel. Even many elves in Valenwood and Alinor suffer under Thalmor control, facing constant surveillance, suppression, and harsh crackdowns such as the Night of Green Fire, where Altmer refugees were hunted and a refugee district was destroyed. The Thalmor allow no opposition, not even from their own people. In Valenwood, purges are frequent, like the one that affected Malborn's family. The core issue with the Thalmor isn't just whether someone is a high elf, it's whether they uphold racial supremacy and accept total surveillance. Turning to practical matters, what might truly influence the outcome of Skyrim's civil war is the Dragonborn, the player, a near-divine figure who defeats Alduin and Marok, masters the Thuum, and commands dragons. In the peace negotiations during Season Unending, both factions defer to this power, recognizing it as decisive. With the ability to destroy fortresses, control storms, and ride dragons, the Dragonborn mirrors the legendary tongues of the First Era only, far stronger. In the world's lore, this power heavily favors whichever faction the Dragonborn chooses to support. This conversation feels a bit dull, mainly because the Dragonborn acts as a kind of cheat code in the scenario. Still, let's consider some other points previously discussed. The assassination of Titus Mead II is likely to be a canonical event, following how faction questlines have traditionally been handled. This means the empire we see in the Elder Scrolls 6 will probably be under a different ruler. In practical terms, this change could actually benefit the empire, especially since the Elder Council appears to support the idea, though their motivations may be rooted more in self-interest than in the empire's well-being. Then again, since the Elder Council holds substantial power by running the empire, they likely want a new ruler who can enhance the empire's influence globally. Still, the assassination might cause instability, as other territories like Hammerfell and Eastern Skyrim might use it as a chance to declare independence. Leadership changes rarely help maintain stability. That said, a younger, more charismatic heir could emerge, someone unburdened by past decisions like the White Gold Concorditu, could lead the empire back to greatness. A bold, passionate new emperor would be a welcome development, a figure reminiscent of Alien, reigniting the empire's ambitions swiftly. Regardless, it's clear the death of Titus Mead II would have major political consequences. A more grounded concern involves the army at Pale Pass. Based on letters from both Imperial and Stormcloak sides about Fort Newgrad, avalanches have apparently blocked this key route into Skyrim from Cyrodiil. On the other side of the pass, Imperial reinforcements are waiting to move in. The timing of when the pass is cleared and how fast those reinforcements arrive will significantly impact the Civil War's outcome. If Ulfric can capitalize on this delay and secure control of Skyrim before the reinforcements arrive, the incoming forces might reconsider and withdraw rather than engage in a full-scale fight. On the other hand, if the pass clears quickly, the new Imperial troops could strengthen the Empire's position and crush the rebellion efficiently. The final outcome depends on both how soon the pass is cleared and how capable the Imperial force turns out to be. It's not clear whether this is a new legion or just supplementary troops. Meanwhile, the Empire faces other challenges, like defending its southern borders from the Aldmeri Dominion. The Stormcloak Rebellion has been a serious drain on their resources, as General Tullius notes. Even the dossier on Ulfric supports this. One topic often overlooked in Civil War discussions is the Thalmor. A quick Imperial victory would allow the Empire to refocus on resisting the Dominion bad news for the Thalmor. Yet a Stormcloak victory isn't ideal for them either, as it would lead to the Empire pulling out all its forces from Skyrim, making it harder for the Thalmor to launch a second Great War. Also, they would face not just an independent Skyrim, but Hammerfell as well. Hammerfell is the wild card. According to the Great War, the Red Guards fought the Dominion to a standstill over 5 years, suffering heavy devastation but showing that the White Gold Concordat might have been avoidable. They argue that if Titus Mede II, a new emperor was installed in Cyrodiil following the assassination of Titus Mede. The Stormcloaks see the Empire as weak and unworthy of ruling Skyrim, but they share a strong hatred for the Thalmor. Ulfric understands who the real enemy is. If you listen closely to the final exchange between Tullius and Ulfric in a Stormcloak victory, it's clear this outcome was exactly what the Thalmor wanted. They incited unrest, forcing the Empire to waste resources and lives putting down the rebellion. Tullius points out that this isn't just a rebellion. Ulfric responds by saying they aren't necessarily the villains, and Tullius admits they might not be, but questions if that makes them the heroes. Ulfric answers that it simply makes them right. He declares he will never surrender the Empire. A growing darkness is approaching, and soon they will be called to fight, whether at home or abroad. While the Almeri Dominion may have defeated the Empire, they haven't defeated Skyrim. There's a subtle implication that Ulfric sees potential in fighting outside Skyrim, perhaps even launching an offensive against the Dominion. An alliance with an independent Hammerfell might be on the table, especially if the threat becomes existential. The civil war in Skyrim is complex. There's a lot to consider, and much of it depends on personal values, whether those are based on ideals or practical concerns, spirituality or material needs. Ultimately, most people will side with the faction that aligns with their own perspective. It's possible to respect both the Stormcloaks and the Imperials. The Thalmor, however, are another matter they're difficult to sympathize with. There's more to come, including an in-depth project covering setting, lore, gameplay mechanics, skills, perks, and more. Stay tuned.